here's a spell, and welcome to the Spellry. We are doing a total compilation of What If Midoriya Was a Jedi? This series has dipped off in more recent parts, but I thought I would put all 8 parts of it together in a single compilation video, and then let you guys decide, similar to What If Midoriya was Yami's reincarnation. I should have more of What If Deku was a D&D sorcerer next week. So, I do sincerely hope you enjoy. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out the new channel trailer with some of the what if ideas I've had, and it has some of the plans for the future of the channel. Now, let's begin. This what if starts out when Midori was 7. It had been a few years since he had gotten diagnosed with being quirkless. He was in the woods crying. Baku had been bullying him. He started wondering why. Why did he have to be born like this? As he walked through, he felt like these woods had something in there for him. It was raining. He thought at least the rain would keep people from noticing the tears. As he stumbled upon a large rock, as he approached it, he slumped up against it, where it jutted out, providing him shelter. As he noticed this rock was metal, he would push against it and a panel would come off. He walked in and saw a skeleton. He panicked for a second, but thought, probably someone's prank. As he noticed a square cube the man held, he felt a tingle in the back of his mind, as if something called out to him. He would walk up and pick it up, with him focusing on it. The cube would begin to morph, the corners turning and him dropping it, as a projection would come out of it, with the message saying, "Hello, I do not know who you are, nor where I am. I seem to be the last survivor of this Jedi ship. Our mission was to secure artifacts to a Jedi temple on the Outer Rim, but the clone troopers attacked us during this process. We managed to take out the ones on the ship, but we could feel our comrades dying. I do not know if any Jedi survived. In fact, as I record this, I know I will not. Our ship had taken damage and we had crashed here. I only hope, if the Force wills it, this message will find a Force sensitive, and that all the knowledge we hold about the Jedi Order will not be lost forever. There are dangerous artifacts, however, but I am not sure if they are secure. They're in the part of the ship that particularly got damaged." He coughed, as it looked like there was discoloration on his hand. Maybe blood? As he said, "If you're watching this, you are Force sensitive. This planet is primitive and situated within the unknown regions, I believe. A Force sensitive is one with a connection to the Force. I do not have enough time to explain this if you are not aware, but I do suggest you look on one of the other holocrons. This is Jedi Master Sam Sarek. May this help whoever finds this." As the recording stopped, Midoriya looked dumbfounded and slack-jawed. He had never seen technology like this. As Midoriya, less afraid, decided to check the rest of this ship. It had been buried somewhat, probably crashed, according to what that holocron thing said. As he checked it, as he found other holocrons, they were in chests. And he had found other skeletons, some wearing armor, and some were definitely not human. With him checking out a creature with a elongated neck and bones that he couldn't describe. Moreover, that man had said he was force sensitive. Midoriya didn't know what this meant. He did think about getting the police, getting other people, but then he thought. He remembered watching a show where aliens arrived, and the government just swept it all up. Midoriya would never get to know what that man meant. As Midoriya decided he would investigate more. Much of his strong emotion he had suffered earlier had somewhat abated. The next day he arrived with a shovel and buried the dead. Well, buried's a strong word. What Midoriya did was shallow graves at best. And it took him several days. As Midoriya would bring a notebook, jotting down everything, as he pulled out another holocron and activated it. We flash forward almost 7 full years, as we see Midoriya's teacher throwing papers in the air saying, "I know you all want to be on the hero track." As the class wound up activating their quirks, Midoriya just not doing anything, and Bakugo going on his normal speech of, the best most of these kids can do is just become sidekicks for some C-lister. As he got on his desk, Midoriya feeling like he should try to do something to take down Bakugo's aggression a peg, would put his hand under his desk and concentrate. He would just scoot the desk a little, causing Bakugo to stumble down and fall. Bakugo would be flustered and angry, but he knew no one in here had a telekinesis quirk, as Midoriya had kept it a secret about this force sensitivity. But back to the current events, Bakugo would somewhat recover and say, "After all, I'm going to UA." Midoriya sighing at the fact that he's somehow still just as cocky. As the teacher said, "Midoriya, weren't you planning on going to UA too?" As the entire class got silent, Midoriya would immediately think, "Crap." As Bakugo was about to get into his face, as the teacher said, "Bakugo, calm down. Take a seat. Or you're getting detention. And trust me, neither of us want to hear your mother yelling at you again." Bakugo immediately froze at the mention of his mother and sat down. After class, Bakugo would blow up Midoriya's notebook and throw out the window. Midoriya, thinking fast, would silently prevent it from falling. As Bakugo got in his face, saying, "Are you trying to upstage me, nerd?" Midoriya, waving his hands, would say, "No, I'm not trying to. I didn't even realize you were still planning on going to UA." As he moved his hands in a relatively circle gesture, as Bakugo said, "If I catch you trying to do that, I'm just gonna blow you up." As he left with his cronies, Midoriya sighing, thinking how it was a good idea he had been practicing so much. As he brought his book back into the room, as he opened up his backpack, a holocron being in there. Midoriya started to think, it's been 7 years since I found that ship. And from the holocrons, my basic training is almost complete. Just one more big thing to do, and then I should move on to the more advanced stuff. As Midoriya thought about the weapons that he had found, primarily the one the holocron referred to as the lightsaber, in that it was one of the crucial things for a Jedi to have. Of course, he had practiced with the other lightsabers on training mode, but that was nothing compared to building his own, and having to go through any of the archives he has recovered on the ship to find out if you can make a lightsaber that just stuns somebody. After all, he can't just go around cutting off people's limbs. As he began to walk home, he would start to think to himself, I'm not even going to UA with... No. Fear and doubt's the enemies of a Jedi. I shouldn't let those thoughts in. After all, what's the difference between my abilities and a quirk? Even though I can do, 5 different things, and from some of the holocrons, I could do a lot more crazy things. But hey, I could probably just hide my quirk like All Might. Then I can just make people guess. As he began trailing off in this thought process, some of which being, does he want to go to UA, or does he want to try to go somewhere a little less notable? That way he can draw less attention. Perhaps he should just wait and become a hero once he's a legal adult and can take a test to see if he's capable of having a provisional hero's license. Or, as he sensed something stopping, as the sewer grate behind him rushed open with a sludge man coming out, saying, Sorry, kid. I'm gonna have to try to take your body. Midoriya would pause for 1 second to register. Is this guy just really creepy, or does this guy's slime power literally have the ability to possess people? Shaking his head, he would immediately force push him away. The sludge monster coming into a invisible bubble that then pushed him back, saying, Ugh, kid, I see you can use your quirk rather well. As Midoriya charged another attack in one of his hands, as he thought to himself that this was called Judgment, as green lightning formed, but before he could release it, All Might would appear, throwing a punch. Midoriya would think for a second, wow, so cool, and the other second, his minor precognition kicked in, telling him that All Might didn't see him, as he quickly jumped out of the way. And a second later, a massive wave of air would slam into the sludge villain, and right where Midoriya was standing a second ago. Midoriya would be glad that he had honed his force powers, even if it meant that little ball shooting at him for hours. As All Might would say, Are you one of this villain's compatriots? Midoriya, shaking his head vigorously, said, No, I am just a civilian. No villain here. As All Might would say, Glad to hear it. All Might would wind up gathering the sludge villain in bottles somehow, as Midoriya would simply ask if he needed any extra help. As All Might would say, no, and that he really has to get going. He would sign Midoriya's notebook and jump away. A few minutes later, Midoriya would be walking home, as he would see an explosion in the distance. As he went to investigate, it would be the sludge villain who, like normal, would have escaped from All Might's pocket. Seriously, he kept a villain with a sludge quirk in soda bottles. as Midoriya thought, crap, as he then checked what heroes came to stop it. And furrowed. Well, and grew concerned. Almost all the heroes were either too busy dealing with civilians, rescue from fire, or couldn't do anything to the sludge villain. As he then realized that Bakugo was the sludge villain's hostage. The sludge villain wrapping around Bakugo, clearly trying to do the same thing he had tried doing to Midoriya. But Midoriya had the ability to push him back. Midoriya would take a second to breathe in and out, as he said, well, time to save him. As Midoriya rushed towards the sludge villain, the pro hero saying, "Kid, stop!" As Midoriya, using his latent abilities, would manage to dodge the sludge villain's attack, throw his backpack at him for a distraction, and would rush up in there, grabbing at the sludge villain, and immediately using all of the power he could muster to force the sludge villain back. The sludge villain would howl, as Midoriya's solemn judgment would hit him. For a quick timeout, for those who do not know, this is a weaker version of Sith Lightning used by Palpatine in the movies. It was invented by the Jedi, but stopped being used due to its similarity to Sith abilities. Now back to the what if. The sludge villain would howl, as Midoriya would then push with all of his might and push him back using the Force, managing to free Bakugo, as both of them just hit the sludge villain before running away. All Might would swing in, saving the sludge villain. Midoriya would get lectured, and on his way home, Bakugo would tell him that Bakugo would say, don't think this means you're better than me. Bakugo would stomp away. A second later, a man would come around the corner. He was scrawny with blonde hair, and he would say, "Excuse me. Hello. I work with All Might." As Midoriya would think, wow, and he would decide to extend his senses, as he sensed that this man seemed a lot like All Might. He had been so excited before, he hadn't really had a good sense of All Might within the Force, but he knew this man's sense felt familiar. As the man would say, "My name is Toshinori Yagi. And All Might would want to know if you would be interested in some training." As Midoriya would think, "Really?" As All Might said, yes. Some training with All Might. And myself, when All Might's not able to. Midoriya would say, "Yes, that would be wonderful." As All Might said, "And what do you call your quirk?" As Midoriya rubbed the back of his head, "I actually, just woken my quirk like a day or two ago. It doesn't have a name yet. In fact, I'm gonna be filling out the paperwork this week." As Midoriya thought, man, I hate lying, but I hadn't put it in. As Toshinori's jaw would almost drop. You're that good. As Midoriya could sense that he didn't fully believe him on the amount of time he's had access to his quirk. As Toshinori would say, "Here's my business card. You don't have to decide right now, and you can think about it." As Midoriya would say, "Yeah, I'll probably contact you within the next week." As Midoriya would go home and activate a holocron. This one describing how to construct your lightsaber. We'd flash forward a few months. All Might, or Toshinori, would start helping to train Midoriya, at least get his physical strength going. But this wouldn't be like in canon with the American Dream Plan. Instead, it would be mostly just strength training, with Midoriya actually spending quite a few days by himself. All Might didn't know what he was doing, but Midoriya was perfecting his force techniques. Since Midoriya had already had a start with getting physically fit. All Might was pretty sure Midoriya was the one he wanted to inherit One for All. By the way, please put in the comments if you don't want that to happen. He hadn't told Midoriya about One for All yet. And he actually had a backup person in Mirio. As we'd fast forward to the day of the entrance exams. As Midoriya started walking, being excited, and would nearly trip. Like in canon, Uraraka would save him, with Bakugo just saying, "Get out of my way, nerd." As Midoriya would have... As Bakugo would know Midoriya had a quirk, and Midoriya would have even registered it under energy manipulation. He had not told anyone that his quirk was basically the Force. He had no real way to explain it to people. As they would go inside, with this going like in canon, with Midoriya actually geeking out. Even though he was still more controlled in this timeline. With Ida confronting President Mike with the fact that you only have introduced 3 machines, but according to the manual, there's a 4th. And as for you, if you do not take this seriously, I recommend you not attending. As Midoriya, who had been slightly geeking out and taking notes, looked over at him and said, what? As President Mike calming them down and saying, well, that's just an obstacle. No points. As it would begin, Midoriya would think to try to cheer Uraraka up, as Ida would put his hand on Midoriya's shoulder and say, are you going to try to distract that girl while she prepares? Midoriya saying, no, I was going to go cheer her up. What's up with you? As Ida would then notice a device Midoriya had on his belt. As Ida would say, you're not allowed to bring hero support items. As Midoriya said, well, there are actually 2 exceptions. One is for stuff to help you control your quirk if you have difficulty with it. The second items are stuff you construct with your quirk. So in other words, I can use this. As he held the tube-like item, as the gates would open, as like in canon, everyone would stall, even Midoriya. His Jedi training, having no clue on what to do. As it would begin, with Midoriya in the lead this time, igniting his lightsaber. The teachers in the main lounge would start questioning that, as one teacher would say, I thought we didn't allow students to have hero items. As the principal said, well, he put in a submission ahead of time and stated that he constructed it with the help of his quirk, along with him constructing it himself. So I allowed it. As Midoriya would be going through, slicing through bots, and even using the Force to crush and slam them against walls. The teachers would be rather surprised, and even All Might. Midoriya hadn't shown him any of his lightsaber skills, and All Might was rather shocked that he was a really good swordsman. As even when several 3- and 2-pointer robots tried getting after him, he would manage to dodge all the attacks and manage to decapitate all of them. As one robot would try to run, and Midoriya would throw his lightsaber, cutting it in half as he pulled it back. Midoriya started to think, I've lost track, but last I checked I should have 40 or so, as he started to think that most of the other students had cleared out this area. As he focused with the Force, he could sense everyone around him, and that everyone was rushing to the opposite side of the arena. probably because there would be more robots there. As Midoriya would start to go over there, the ground would shake as the zero pointer would appear. As Midoriya swallowed hard, the zero pointer was a massive machine, at least as tall as a 10-story building, if not taller. Midoriya started to think that, yeah, no way I can take that thing down. As he was going to just go around it, he would hear a girl cry for help. He would look for where the sound came from. As he would look in front of the zero-point robot, he would see a blonde-haired girl pinned under some rocks. As he ran for it, with him managing to use his telekinesis to lift up the rocks. But it wasn't fast enough, as the brunette-haired girl from earlier, Ochako, would run up and touch the rocks. Midoriya would realize they had become incredibly light and would just throw them off quickly. As Midoriya told Uraraka to take the girl and go, as he realized that the zero-pointer robot was just rushing towards them. As he would look down at his green blade and come up with a plan, he would run in front of the zero-pointer, cutting its shreds clean through with the lightsaber. The zero-pointer would wind up sliding off and crashing into the side of a building with its speed lowered. Midoriya would meet back up with Uraraka to make sure they were okay. As the bell would ring, indicating that this test had ended. As Uraraka would actually introduce herself to Midoriya, as Midoriya would actually ask the name of the girl they had saved, as she would respond, Toga, as that would end the test. Midoriya would go home and be worried for a few weeks at the fact that he hadn't gotten any note and he had no idea how well he did. As he would get a letter from UA, him opening up as a hologram would pop out. Midoriya would think it's similar to the technology on the alien ship he found, as a message from All Might would play. Midoriya, not realizing that All Might would be teaching, was rather surprised. As All Might would explain the hero points that Midoriya earned by helping to save that girl, along with Uraraka, resulting in him getting a score of 89. Midoriya would be happy as he celebrated that night with his mother. As the next day he decided to go to the ship and go deeper into their cargo hold to see what else. As he opened it, as he would notice a large section was missing. As he remembered back to the first holocron he had looked at, as it said there were some dangerous artifacts, and I don't think they're here. As he only saw one package that was labeled Sith. The rest was missing in a large hole that just opened up to the ground. Somewhere else in the city, Toga would be walking into a lair, with someone asking, "Have you received your acceptance letter yet? Or has the plan gone awry?" Toga would smile, saying, "I got in. And why do you have to frequently have the lights off?" As she reached behind her and pulled out a red blade, illuminating the room. As she said, "Master." Midoriya would have a nightmare. He would see red lightsaber blades and death. He would wake up tired. He put this off to nerves. After all, he was going to UA today. As he went to UA, he would get there and be a little lost at first. Just the sheer size of the building. As he would eventually find his way to Class 1A. As he approached the door, he would think that, man, this is just one massive door. Do they have, like, giants inside? But as he got closer, he would hear two voices he recognized arguing. One was the boy from the entrance exam. The other one was Bakugo. As he let out a long breath, he was hoping that... He knew Bakugo had gotten in, but he was hoping Bakugo wouldn't be in the same class as him. As he opened up the door, sure enough, those two people were arguing. Bakugo seemed to look at him like Midoriya was some weird unicorn. Well, Ida approached him and said, I'm sorry for being so rude to you. You were able to divine what the meaning of the test was, and I didn't. As Midoriya just put up his hand and said, no, I just did what I thought was right. As a blonde girl and a brunette would walk up behind Midoriya, as the brunette would say, I know that messy hair. As they would introduce themselves. The brunette would introduce herself as Ochaku Uraraka, and the other one would introduce herself as Toga Hagakure. As she just said, you can call me Toga. As Midoriya, being overwhelmed by the fact he's actually talking to two girls, would be a little flustered. But a second later, he would notice, he would sense something a little off. As he turned around and saw this weird caterpillar-looking creature. Turns out it was his teacher in a sleeping bag. He would introduce himself as Aizawa, their new homeroom teacher. As Aizawa would tell them that they're going to have a quirk evaluation test. Aizawa would tell them to put their PE uniforms on and meet him outside. A minute later, they would be changed into their PE uniforms, and Aizawa would explain to everyone how this was going to work and what a quirk evaluation test is. As he pulled Bakugo aside and have him demonstrate how far he could throw normally and how far he could throw with his quirk. This would surprise everyone, and someone made the mistake of saying this would be fun. Then Aizawa would simply say, you think this is fun? The person who gets last place is going to get expelled. Everyone would be shocked. A couple people started saying how it wasn't fair. As Aizawa said, our villain attacks fair. Our natural disasters fair. You're not going into some easy desk job. You're training to become heroes. It's your job to fight this unfairness. As the entire class, you could almost hear them all gulping. As the test would begin, All Might would actually be watching from the sidelines, a little concerned that Izuku will get kicked out, considering All Might was trying to figure out the best time to approach him about being his successor. As the activities would go, pretty much exactly like in canon, Midoriya would do actually fairly well compared to in canon. And if anyone's wondering about Mineta, he's vanished. Yep, Toga took his spot. As things would start winding down and Midoriya would throw the ball, he would get a little bit further than Bakugo, using the force to launch the ball out of his hand. Aizawa would find Midoriya being a curious case. He kept getting the sense Midoriya wasn't showing them everything, or that Midoriya was keeping some sort of secret. But Midoriya passed with overall average, as Toga was actually the one who got the last spot, which surprised everyone, even Aizawa. But Aizawa would feel that it was all a ruse for them to show what they could do, particularly under stress. And as someone said, yay, no one was going to get expelled. As Aizawa corrected him, I would have expelled you if you showed no talent. Everyone here shows some skill, but UA is going to be a tough school. It's likely if you don't keep improving that you will be kicked or fail. As everyone just said, yes sir, since no one wanted to test him. Bakugo would approach Midoriya and ask him how long he was hiding his quirk. As Midoriya said, well, do you remember I said I awakened it? As Bakugo says, bull. I've seen you use your quirk. You have way too much skill for this to be a new development. As Bakugo would walk away in a humph. Aizawa taking note. The following days would be pretty simple. But then Aizawa would come into class one morning and say, there's a big decision you guys as a class need to make. As everyone was at the edge of their seats. As Aizawa said, "Who's gonna be your class representative?" Everyone let out a sigh of relief, as this would go very similar to in canon, with Midoriya getting a majority of 4 people to vote for him. And Midoriya himself would be surprised at this. With Yaozu, I have trouble pronouncing her name, would be vice president. As the day would go on, Midoriya would start feeling a disturbance. He had seen all the reporters outside. They've even hassled him to get in. Apparently, the fact that All Might was a part of this new teaching staff was big news. But Midoriya started feeling a malice in the Force. He couldn't nail it down. As the alarms would be tripped. As this would begin a panic. As Midoriya would see that it was apparently the reporters who had managed to get past the gate. He tried signaling everyone, but no one was listening. Ida quickly came up with a plan and told Uraraka to touch him, as she made him float. Midoriya would see this and realize what the plan was, as he used the Force to push Ida to where everyone could see him. Ida would help calm things down, and Midoriya would actually suggest that they make Ida the class representative. Like in canon, no one would really have any large-scale complaints. But as the day ended, Midoriya would not be able to get the sense that it wasn't the reporters. He had sensed malice and a darkness. As the UA staff looked at the main gate that had been destroyed, it was decayed. As Aizawa says, "Who's the intruder?" As Nezu corrected him, "He thinks there were 2. Aizawa would be so surprised and said, "What makes you say that?" As Nezu said, "It's mostly just a hunch." As he looked at a door into the building that was cut with what seems to be some sort of blowtorch, but it was much hotter. Perhaps a quirk? And wasn't this decay? Midoriya would be meditating, trying to perceive the Force. After all, he had thought he had felt a disturbance, but he sensed nothing. As he would get dressed for UA and head out, he would meet Uraraka and Ida on his way to school, and they would arrive. As this would be the first day of the hero training, or combat training. As school would begin, Aizawa would explain what they would be doing, as All Might would come in saying, "I come into a room like a normal person." Everyone thinking, yeah, that isn't normal. As All Might would hit a button and suitcases would come out containing everyone's hero gear. As they would go to the changing rooms and put it on, everyone would come out and most everyone would be complimenting them. Uraraka would be a little embarrassed about her not being specific enough, as Midoriya would compliment her. Midoriya's costume would be a little different. He would actually use his rebreather, and the headpiece would be completely ignored. Other than that, it would still be a dark green costume with a utility belt, including a place for his lightsaber. Other than that, yeah, I wouldn't really incorporate anything from the Jedi robe, as Uraraka would compliment him. As All Might would explain the exercise, you would have 2 teams, a hero and villain team. The villains won by protecting a bomb for a set period of time or capturing the heroes. Likewise, the heroes could either win by securing all the villains or securing the bomb, as everyone would be drawing lots. Midoriya and Uraraka would get in one team, and Ida and Bakugo would, as Midoriya realized that he would be fighting Ida and Bakugo, and they would be first up. As he sighed, "At least this will be over quickly." As All Might would ask Midoriya if that lightsaber could not cut through things. As Midoriya just said, oh yeah, I already modified this so it has a setting that'll just zap someone. It's not a true stun, but all it will do is basically give them a jolt of electricity. As All Might nodded. As Bako and Ito would go in, followed 5 minutes later by Uraraka and Midoriya. Bakugo would have a very different disposition, as he just told, but the plan would say the same. He just told Ida to guard the bomb and that he will go handle the heroes. Ida quickly saying that they should strategize more, as Bakugo just walked away. As Midoriya would finish explaining the plan, Bakugo would come around the side as Midoriya managed to block and push Uraraka out of the way. Midoriya said, now, and Uraraka ran past Bakugo. As Midoriya lit up his lightsaber, Bakugo would say, I have a lot of questions for you, Midoriya, and I think now might be a good time for me to get some answers. As we flash to Uraraka, looking for the bomb, as she found it and saw Ida preparing, chuckling to herself. As Ida heard this. As we flash back to Bako and Midoriya, they would begin their battle. As a green lightsaber clashed with Bakugo's gauntlets, explosions would go off, and they would be going all at it. Bakugo would be yelling, so, I could tell you had just awakened at 10 months. As Midoriya said, it was more complicated than that. As Bakugo just said, how does it get more complicated? Do you think I'm dumb? As Bakugo would send a kick, Midoriya would block, use his lightsaber as it would hit Bakugo's side. Bakugo would grunt as he felt a jolt of electricity. Bakugo would let out an explosion and say, do you think you're better than me? Midoriya would counter with a upward slash of the lightsaber that made Bakugo jump back. As he responded verbally with, why do you think I think that? And besides, you were the one who started bullying me. As he would swing his lightsaber back. As everyone in the control room would be thinking, man, they're getting through some personal issues, aren't they? As Bakugo would say, if you had told me, I wouldn't have bullied you. And besides, why didn't you ever fight back? All you were being was weak. After all, how would someone without any form of power become a hero? Since coming to the school, I've been able to tell I'm not the top dog. But what do you think would have happened if someone without a quirk would try to fight someone like me? Seriously, they would probably be killed. As Bakugo managed to slam Midoriya back with 2 explosions. As Midoriya just said, the ways of the Jedi are patience. And I just waited. Bakugo would say, what does that even mean? As Bakugo just said, I'm gonna end this. As he brought up his gauntlet and said, these gauntlets contain my sweat. They charge up. And when I pull the pin, as Midoriya put 2 and 2 together and realized, crap. As he used lightsaber, switching it to its normal lethal mode and slice through the floor, Bakugo would let out a massive explosion. All Might immediately telling him not to use that again, or he will fail him. As everyone was wondering where Midoriya was, as from behind Bakugo, someone said, lightning judgment. As lightning hit Bakugo, Bakugo yelled out. As Midoriya would jump forward, Bakugo would be off balance as Midoriya would just use a force push and slam him into a wall. Bakugo would hit his head and be knocked out. A second later, the hero team would be declared the winners, as Bakugo would humph off after school. But the rest of the matches would go the same as canon. As a few days later, they'd come into classes, Aizawa would tell them that they're going to be doing rescue training. We begin the day after the first hero course specific class and Midoriya and Bakugo's fight. Midoriya was meditating. He was glad they had won, but he was feeling bad thinking that he should have told Bakugo sooner. After all, he didn't really mean to deceive him. There was a lot to pack down with him having the Force. In fact, it was a concept he knew he would have a hard time explaining to others. Then he looked at the holocron he had brought out. It was one about lightsaber training, and it had helped him start to perfect his style. They called it Form 5, and maybe even some of what they also called Form 3. One being overly defensive, while the other was a mix of offense and defense. But he also was thinking of another thing. How would he use the Force? He already knew he had to disguise what his quirk was. He knew pro-heroes who did it. That way the villains wouldn't have as much information on them. But even more than that, he had affinity with the Force beyond the average person. And the holocrons had mentioned powers that were for Jedi Masters, and even more that were classified as controversial or even forbidden. He was the only Jedi on the planet. The only one who went by the philosophy. And it had been nagging at him for a while. He had gotten to a certain level, but couldn't determine if he should observe the holocrons describing those techniques. Or even some of the ones that he had two that were labeled Sith holocrons. And while many of the holocrons described them as being tainted of the dark side, which Midoriya kinda understood. Though it did lead things into question whether or not he should observe them and decide for himself if they were abilities he wanted to use. After all, if they could be used to help people, were they truly evil? Not to mention, he had to take into account, he didn't know anything about the Jedi in truth, only what was there. What if it was just a bias? What if the Jedi just didn't want to tell people things, or keep their members in check? He sighed. He had had those thoughts for a while. After all, he didn't even have a master to teach him. As he heard his mother remind him to get ready, as he quickly prepared to head off to school. We flash over to UA, with Nezu talking to Aizawa. As Aizawa said, "What do you call me here for?" "Nothing much. I wanted to ask you about one of your students." Aizawa sighed. "If it's a Bakugo character, I was going to talk to him about it, make him under..." As Nezu shook his head. "No, it's the other one, the green-haired one." Aizawa looked at him. "You mean the kid with the telekinesis quirk?" "Kinda." As he pulled up an image of Izuku in the hero training. As he said, "Do you have any idea what's up with that saber made out of what seems to be light? It's not labeled on his hero equipment." Aizawa looked at it. "Well, he must have made it." Is there something wrong? Is that thing..." As the principal shook his head. "No, it's the fact it's so effective. You would think if he made it, it would be a little, well, shoddier. Well, if he had made it with no assistance. The second thing is All Might wanted me to observe it." Aizawa looked at him. "Was there any particular thing?" "No, All Might picked up on something," as he played the footage. "Did you notice it?" As Aizawa brought his head closer to the screen and moved it back 5 seconds. As he looked at it and said, "I think." As Nezu nodded, "All Might told me that they were apparently childhood friends, but it was still throwing him off. Seemingly, Izuku was moving before Bakugo even launched his attack. To be fair, someone who knows someone else very well should be able to do that, but to read someone's moves and react that quickly without a quirk that enhances your perception or speed. You think the kid has multiple quirks, or maybe some other? As Nazu said, hard to say. With them being childhood friends, it is just possible Izuku can read him like a book. But it still doesn't quite sit right with me. As Azawa looked at him. Given the fact that your quirk allows you to calculate incredibly fast, that is kinda concerning. Either way, I want you to keep an eye on him. All Might thinks it might just be nothing, but I've watched all of his moves, and he has a similar reaction time to all of them, which is virtually instantaneous, because he starts moving to react before Bakugo does. As Nezu said, well, I need to prepare for my job, since I'm the principal of this school, and a racer. I would recommend you get out there to make sure your students get into the school in time. As a racer had sighed. I was just hoping it would be a couple of them. Is it that bad? I doubt they'll be able to get into the building. As the students were trying to make their way into the building, reporters were bombarding them, asking them questions about All Might. As Izuku was getting nearly harassed, he decided to wave his arm and say something he was questioning if he should do. But he did. As he said, "There's no way I can know anything. You'll go and think of something interesting to say." As the reporter seemed to daze out and repeat what Izuku said, as he walked away. As Doria quickly hurried up, he was not thrilled to see even more around the gate. But he quickly saw Racerhead approaching them, as he told them to basically get lost. Izuku would quickly rush around and get into the building. As he checked his schedule, as it wasn't going to be a very busy day, he hoped to see All Might again. But it seemed that Hero class wasn't going to be occurring today. He would hurry along to class, as it was a pretty normal day of school. As he sat for lunch with his newly found friends, Ida Tenya, Ochako Uraraka, and the girl he just knew as Toga. As the question brought around about people's families and quirks. Izuku was surprised he didn't notice it before, but Ida was actually from a generational hero family. And Ida had a speed enhancement quirk with pipes coming out of his legs. Midoriya had to admit, sometimes he did question how exactly did quirks occur? And Ochako's quirk was pretty powerful. As they asked Toga what her quirk was, she was nervous and mentioned that it was technically a type of shapeshifting. As Midoriya was quite excited to see such a vast variety of quirks. But Toga seemed to be nervous about her quirk. Midoriya had seen something similar with people who had a quirk, but it had some embarrassing requirement. Or people had previously ridiculed them for. As he looked over, and Ochako seemed to have a similar reaction. Ida was hard to read on it, but he didn't push it. As Midoriya almost forgot that no one had asked about his quirk yet, as he kind of mentioned that his quirk's primary ability was telekinesis. As Ochako said, "Primary?" As he brushed the back of his head. "Yeah, it's complicated, but I can do a few different things. Not just levitate objects." Ochako seemed to nod. As the day would overall go without a hitch. The only thing was Aizawa mentioning they were going to be going on a trip tomorrow. As Midoriya would start to head out, his new friends would walk with him. And Toga would actually mention "Hey, Zuko, you want to hang out sometime outside of school?" Izuku was a bit shocked, as, he's like, sure, we can, do that. As Toga smiled, Midori going to school. And when he got there, Aizawa would announce to everyone that they were going to be going on a type of field trip to a facility that they refer to as the USJ. As they'd be heading there, a discussion about quirks would come up. And they would ask people, and this would pretty much stay the same as canon. But when they pressed Midoriya, he would just respond with them. He would be incredibly vague, with just saying that his quirk was more about taking in energy and then applying it to do different things. It was a very versatile quirk, with the others following along. As they would arrive at the USJ, walking into the building, they would see a Pro Hero 13. As she started explaining how her quirks works and how valuable it was to be able to control your quirk without hurting people around you. Midoriya would sense something dark as he would look out, as Aizawa would see this and say, "Midoriya, get back into the..." As he stopped. As Kirishima also said, "Does anyone else see that down there? I didn't realize we'd be having faux villains." As Aizawa would quickly pass 13 and ask her if All Might was anywhere in the building. She would silently whisper to him that he wore out his time limit. Despite Aizawa not really caring for All Might's bombastic personality and how connected he was to the media and all that, Aizawa would have really liked to have someone with his kind of power in a fight. As Aizawa looked around, noting that the security system wasn't going off, as he quickly said, "Everyone, try to call emergency services." As everyone started reaching for their phones and trying. As Aizawa started to hear replies saying, "No signal." As even Kaminari, using his radio, said, "Nothing. Just static." As he would quickly say, 13, protect the kids." As Midoriya would quickly say, "Let us..." Aizawa quickly shooting back with, "I can handle this. Go!" A pro hero needs to have more tricks up his sleeve than just his power. As he jumped down, using his quirk to cancel out other people's quirks, as he used martial arts to incapacitate everyone else. As everyone was about to run out of the building, a shadow would appear in their pathway. Midoriya was gonna try to use a forced push to push him away, but Bakugo and Kaminari would get in the way. They would also be in the way of 13 using her quirk, allowing Kogiri to teleport everyone around. Midoriya would try to push away the smoke, but he failed. It moved too quickly for him to push it away. As he would get teleported, he would quickly realize that he was underwater as he tried holding his breath. As a villain that looked like a shark would approach him, he would quickly use the force to push him away and try to reach the surface. Tsuyu would quickly swoop in and grab him. They retreated to the ship in the middle of the shipwreck zone, as Midoriya would ask if they're the only ones there. As she nodded, Midoriya would quickly spread out his senses as he sensed multiple villains in the water. As Katsuyu would ask if he had any ideas about how to get out. Midoriya would be slightly distracted as he was worried about his friends. As he quickly started thinking of a plan. Looking at the situation, he realized the villains were hesitating on coming aboard. He realized that they didn't know what quirks they had. Midoriya wasn't barely hampered in the shipwreck zone, while Tsuyu had an advantage. Neither one of them had been sent to a zone that particularly impeded them. As Midoriya smiled, whispered to Katsu'd the plan. Then Midoriya quickly did a fake freak out, and him and Katsu started to act like they were panicking, and quickly ran into the ship. The villains, now confident that these hero hopefuls would be easy to defeat, as they destroyed part of the ship and rushed aboard the wreckage, only to not find anyone. Tsuyu and Midoriya had managed to sneak away by using his lightsaber to cut a hole in the bottom of the ship as they snuck out, as they would quickly manage to swim to the shore. Unlike in canon, they wouldn't be able to immediately see where Aizawa was. Midoriya would quickly tell Tsuyu to meet up with the others, as he decided to check to see how Aizawa was doing, as it wasn't very good. Aizawa was pinned to the ground by a large, black, purplish figure. A pale man with hands covering his entire body was gloating. The smoke villain also wasn't, but the white-haired man was saying something as Midoriya focused. As he said, "Eraserhead. It is quite annoying when heroes do live up to their hype. But, unfortunately for you, this will be the end of the road." As he quickly reached out his hand to Aizawa's face, Midoriya quickly realizing what he was about to do. Midoriya would rush forward. As he condensed the force to do something. In his hurry, he focused energy into his arm and released it, as it shot out as force lightning. It quickly impacted both the creature and the white-haired man. The man, being Shigaraki, would scream as bolts of electricity rushed through his body. The Nomu would also be affected, as Midoriya, being surprised, not intending on using force lightning, quickly stopped it, as a man he hadn't noticed before rushed at him. The man had his head almost completely covered, with some sort of cape flowing behind him. He quickly slammed into Midoriya. Midoriya would quickly spin and ignite his lightsaber. The man would say, "I see. So you're," as Shigaraki would yell, "You brat! Nomu, get him!" Midoriya turned, unable to see the Nomu, but using his clairvoyance would roughly guess where he was, as he outstretched his lightsaber, as it impaled part of the Nomu. Unfortunately, it had only caught it in the shoulder, as its other arm came around and clocked Midoriya in the stomach, sending him flying back. As Midoriya would slam hard against the ground, skidding. Midoriya was about to black out. All he could do was pull on the force to try to sustain his body. Flashing over to Aizawa's perspective, he would see Midoriya get laid out by the Nomu. He had been blocking his quirk, but he was still strong enough to do that. As he was surprised to see Midoriya actually catch the creature and catch him in his lower shoulder. As between that and hitting Midoriya, it nearly severed the arm. Aizawa would be almost horrified as he saw it slowly start to regenerate. The man with the fully covered mask would say, "You weren't supposed to do that." As Shigaraki said, "You're not the boss of me." As some of the villains Aizawa knocked out started to wake up, as despair started to fill him, but he noticed some of the ones near Midoriya were getting up but passing out mere seconds later. He wasn't sure what it was. He couldn't even be sure what he was seeing. His brain cloudy. The only thing keeping him conscious was the adrenaline pumping through his body. As soon as that was gone, he would be out like a light. Midoriya was foolish for helping him, but he also saw Midoriya's goal to help people, as the doors would quickly slam open as All Might would come rushing in. Here it would go like in canon, except though the man with the full head covering would escape with Shigaraki, Midoriya being taken to the hospital unconscious. Though, to the detective's surprise, the villains around him were incredibly weak, some even in critical condition, not from any physical damage, but instead, it was like their entire bodies had lost significant amounts of energy. As Midoriya was quickly taken to the emergency room, we'd see Toga come out of the USJ as she asked where Midoriya was. Uraraka would tell her that they had taken Midoriya to the hospital. As Toga would quickly rush to the hospital, there Midoriya would wake up, his wounds mostly healed. Only a few bandages to make sure nothing got moved out of place. As Recovery Girl said, "It's amazing. When you got here, I expected that you wouldn't make a quick recovery. But with my power and yours, it seems like you made a full recovery." Midoriya asked, "What do you mean?" "It seems that somehow you were already regenerating. I'm not quite sure what it was." As Midoriya's mother would come rushing in a minute later, saying, "Izuku, I'm so glad you're safe. Don't ever scare me like that again." As Midoriya would say, "Don't worry, Mom, I don't intend on it." As she said, "I did meet your friend while we were waiting for you to wake up." Midoriya would be surprised, as outside he would see Toga by the doorway. Midoriya would be surprised and said, "Toga, glad you're alright. What happened?" As Toga would actually fill him in. "Luckily, you were the only student with any form of serious injury. But Aizawa got banged up pretty bad. He's probably a few doors down." As Midori asked, "So what happened after I got knocked out?" As Toga explained that Ida managed to get help, but luckily for all of them, he ran to All Might on his way. And when All Might got there, he defeated that huge black thing and forced the others to retreat. Then the UA teachers came in and cleared out the rest of them. As she said, "Oh, there's someone from UA who wants to talk to you, Izuku." As Midoriya would move around, feeling a little weak thanks to the loss of energy that Recovery Girl used to heal him, but he just quickly used the Force to enhance his body. Recovery Girl's surprised he could walk around like that. As this new yellow-haired man came in asking, "Do you mind if I talk to Mr. Midoriya alone?" As Inko would ask, "Why?" As the man would just say, "Just need to ask him a couple things, and he seems to be doing just fine." As Inko would nod and say, "I'll be right back." "Midoriya, do you want anything?" As Midoriya said, "No." As Inko looked at him and said, "I talked to Recovery Girl before you woke up. She told me that the way her quirk worked is that it relied on getting energy from your body, and that you should eat and drink something once you woke up." As Midoriya said, "Okay. I guess in that case, a soda and some chips or whatever good they have in the cafeteria." As Inko would smile as she left. As Inko would leave along with Toga, as the yellow-haired man would sit down and say, "Young Midoriya, I want to talk to you about something very important." As he would quickly bulk up. We start with Midoriya. He was at home thinking. They had canceled school for a week following the attack, both for people to not get overly stressed and for them to thoroughly check school security. All Might about his greatest secret. He had a quirk that could be passed on, called One for All. He had offered it to Midoriya. Now, unlike in canon, Midoriya had a power. And All Might told him that, given his physical prowess, he should be able to take One for All rather quickly. Midoriya said he wanted some time to think, and he had come to a decision. He was going to accept One for All and the responsibility that came with it. He would be meeting All Might later that day, and according to what All Might said, he would have to ingest one of his hairs. Midoriya thought, that's a bit gross, but not the worst thing. As he was also pondering another thing. He had discovered a new force ability. The thing is, it drained life. He had used it subconsciously to try to help sustain his body at the end of the fight. He had also used Force Lightning. He was desperate, but still. Those two abilities were unnerving him. Though, he wasn't sure if it was the light side variant of Force Lightning or the dark side. He had learned the light side variant. It required strong emotion that would release as pure energy. The only difference between light and dark side was the emotions drawn on. He had remembered some of the Jedi Masters saying that you should detach yourself from emotion, but Midoriya started to think about it, and that seemed like everything wrong. Like the Jedi themselves were cutting themselves off from the Force, from humanity. But yet, what they said about the dark side, he shook his head. Midoriya was determined. He would have to decide this at a later date. But for right now, he had to meet All Might. As he left home, he would meet All Might on the beach. All Might was in his skinny form. He realized he had sensed it about All Might, that in the Force itself, his injury resonated. As All Might said, "Alright, just eat this," as Midoriya took the hair and swallowed it. It felt nasty. As Midoriya just said, how long until I should notice an effect? All Might said, hard to say. A few hours, possibly. Your quirk's a little different, so it's possible that All For One might manifest slightly differently for you than me. Midoriya nodded. As Midoriya asked, was there anything else you wanted to ask me? All Might said, no. I'm glad with the choice I made. Some people who got One For All didn't even know the person they're inheriting it from. Compared to that, I've had the great pleasure of choosing my successor. Midoriya said, yeah, thank you for picking me, but did not slip his mind the wording about some didn't get to choose. As All Might said, school will start back up in 2 days. Don't forget, this is a secret. You can't tell anyone. Midoriya nodded, before saying, I should get going. That night, Midoriya would have dreams. Multiple lightsabers, dueling, people he hadn't met yet, death. Midoriya didn't know what to make of it. It hadn't been the first time he had a dream like this, but it was more vivid. A long white-haired man said, I'm surprised to see someone with this power. Before Midoriya would wake up, his room was a mess. It looked like his quirk went wild in his sleep. Scorch marks on the walls and things moved around. As Inko would rush in and see how Midoriya was doing. As Midoriya just said, I just had a bad dream. Inko would look at him and says, it's related to USJ. You don't... But Midoriya just waved his hand. No, it didn't have anything to do with that. I'm not sure. Inko said, do you want a glass of warm milk, or... Midoriya said, no. I should be able to get back to bed. Thanks. As the next day, Aizawa would make an announcement. The sports festival was coming, and they should be getting ready. Midoriya felt elated, but he also felt an impending sense that things on the horizon weren't going to be kind. We begin this video with everyone in Class 1A preparing, thinking about their normal school life, along with the sports festival. The UA Sports Festival was an important time for the school. Primarily, it had all the students participate, and it has a variety of different challenges. Things got even more intense when they walked out of when they went to leave their classroom, and other students were there. Midoriya sensed various emotions when he pushed the force out. He wasn't quite sure what it was. Not quite contempt, maybe a little jealousy. As Bakugo told everyone, "Get out of the way, extras." As Midoriya wanted to facepalm. Because of course, Bakugo's first reaction was antagonize the people who had gathered outside. But some people cleared out when Bakugo said this. As a purple-haired boy walked up and said, "You're pretty bold." As Bakugo was nearly replied before the boy continued. People have been removed from the hero track during the sports festival. They've also been people from general studies and other courses have been put into the hero course. Everything clicked together for Midoriya. If some of the students gathered here did good enough, they would get put in the hero course. As shortly after that, Midoriya would notice that things were more tense around the school. Everyone seemed on edge. As only a week later, as he would chat with his friends and slowly start building up, how would he address the sports festival? As we flash to the day of the sports festival, as the students have been gathered, as President Mike explains, the first challenge of the sports festival is an obstacle course. As President Mike would ask Aizawa, who is still injured after his fight with the Nomu, "Now Aizawa, what do you think is the first challenge the students are going to face is?" As Aizawa said, "The door." As everyone began crowding through the door, it turned into a traffic jam fast. Some people jumping above, flying. One guy even liquefied the ground and swam under it. Midoriya had a different strategy. He pushed. As he gathered the force, he would push in front of his body and push everyone who had gathered in front of him through the door. Midoriya thought it shouldn't be too bad, as a number of people got sent tumbling out and landed on their faces. People like Bakugo, Shoto, and other students had already gotten ahead of him. As he would think to himself, "Why didn't I just immediately do that?" As it would only take a minute for everyone unentangle themselves from the pile Midoriya pushed out and rush forward as well. As President Mike would say, I think Izuku Midoriya just uses quirk to push people out of the way." But Aizawa, isn't it against the rules to attack your fellow participants with quirks? As Aizawa said, "It wasn't an attack. He simply pushed them out of the way. It would be an attack if he tried holding them in place or if he had used undue force. This would be no different than a trip. As the students rushed through, they would get to the first obstacle. As multiple robots, including 3 zero-pointers, would pop out of the ground. As Midoriya just looked at them and said, "I wish I had my lightsaber." As Shoto would freeze many of them. As other people would rush through, the robot would fall. Midoriya would try to use the force, but it was too heavy and falling too fast. It would crush 2 people. A few seconds later, both of them popping out, being Tetsu and Kirishima, both having powerful defensive quirks. Midoriya would quickly jump over them and try to maintain a lead. Meanwhile, Toga and Uraraka would be rushing through, both of them secretly agreeing to help each other, at least during the team portions, as the next obstacle would involve going over a ravine crossing using ropes. Midoriya would look down and see a 20-foot drop, as he quickly channeled the force and would make a jump, managing to get halfway across before crawling onto a central island before preparing to jump again, as he would see a pink-haired girl using a device to slide across crossed on the rope. He would also see Uraraka and Toga both making their way across, assisting each other, as he would see Bakugo in the distance, keeping a very tight lead. Midoriya had grabbed a piece of a robot, thinking he might be able to use it in the competition. Rushing forward, putting all of his might into getting there, Midoriya would quickly stop at the next challenge, not seeing anything before Ida would shoot past him using his speed before getting shot back with a mine. It had been a minefield. Midoriya blinked at the fact that, wait, UA seriously just put a minefield as part of a test? As students that had gotten ahead of him quickly started to have some issues. Even the boy that could liquefy the ground seemingly wasn't able to dodge all the mines. As Aizawa came on the loudspeakers, announcing this is probably the toughest challenge they have to face, given the fact that students in the head were actually at a disadvantage, not having any of the path cleared, as Midoriya knew he couldn't jump across. There was too large of a gap. He thought maybe he could use the force to explode the mines before he had a realization as he started digging up the mines. As Bakugo would shoot across the gap, Shoto would just grimace as he froze the ground, sliding over it to catch up with Bakugo. Both of them would be at the lead, as Midoriya would dig up a bunch of the mines, as he would mumble out, "Force, be with me," as he used the mines and the piece of metal he had and detonated them, as everyone was shocked at the size of the explosion, as Midoriya used that to send himself flying forward. He used the force to control his landing as he sailed past Shoto and Bakugo, using the force to enhance his body, and of planned timing, he would hit the ground and roll before rushing forward. Bakugo and Todoroki right on his heels, as they would all reach the finish line seemingly at the same time. As over the loudspeakers, President Mike would say, "Wow, Aizawa, all three of your students were first. But who came in first place?" As he would examine the footage, as Midoriya had stuck out his arm just a little bit more and was crowned first, with many of the students coming in after from both Class 1B, Class 1A, with only a handful of general studies students. As Midoriya was feeling pleased with himself, managing to win the obstacle course, with the staff giving everyone a minute of breather, Midnight would announce the next competition, a game of chariots, with the team having points based on where they came in the foot race. Midoriya was excited until Midnight revealed that the person who scored number one had 1,000,000 points and had by far the most points of anyone in the competition, as Midoriya, even without his ability to sense people's emotion through the Force, managed to sense the hostility in everyone around him, feeling like 100 eyes gazed on him with hungry expressions. Though he knew, in truth, it was less than 50 people, he was pretty sure some of the people in the crowd were also watching him with great interest. As we flash to a man covering most of his face discreetly, as he said, "Quite an interesting show, young Jedi. Perhaps you might be a proper rival one day. Or perhaps join me." As the competition began, or more specifically, the competition to find the people for the competition. As students ran around trying to get people to join, Bakugo and Todoroki were everyone's first choice, while Midoriya was left a little high and dry for people to join. After all, who wanted to join the person with the outrageous amount of points? But he was approached by just enough people. Toga, Ochako, and Tokoyami. As he assembled his plan, other groups would form, as the all-out brawl of this event would occur, with many attacking him first, as Todoroki managed to separate them from Deku with a string of ice. Midoriya was puzzled for a second before he saw Todoroki coming at them in full force, as he realized that he wanted all of the points for himself, and that they were now trapped. Meanwhile, Bakugo would be tearing through the competition, using Sero's tape, along with a girl from the support course's gadgets to maneuver around the stadium, tearing apart the competition by stealing headbands left, right, and center. While other teams relied on subterfuge and stealth, many just ran at their opponents, sparking mini brawls with people trying to grab at each other's headbands with the points, and some employing their quirks to great effect. Many of the surviving support and general study students were being picked off quite rapidly in this competition. As Todoroki would come at Midoriya, Midoriya would just tell Uraraka now, as she would use her quirk to put all of them in zero gravity. As he would use the force to push off the ground, sending them flying over the ice wall. Instead, now just trapping Todoroki with his own ice. As Midoriya would use the force to yank a couple headbands from other groups, Todoroki would surprisingly manage to get over the wall and come right at them. As Midoriya pulled on the force, Todoroki would bring his hand up as it would light up with fire. Midoriya would be surprised with this as he released a force push. The force would manage to push the flames back and destabilize Todoroki's balance, giving them a minute to gain more space. As Todoroki would push forward, as Ida would reveal his trump card. Cipro burst as he rushed forward. As Midoriya would try defending the headband he held, Todoroki would grab it. Midoriya, using the force to grab a couple headbands from Todoroki, but only managing to catch a couple. They had lost the 1 million headband before it was revealed that Tokoyami had managed to grab it. Midoriya sighed in relief, as he managed to thank everyone for their hard work, as being able to grab that had secured their place in the next round. And you've made it to the end of this video. I do sincerely hope you enjoyed. You probably did if you made it this far. And I would just like to say, I hope you have a good day. Please like, share, and subscribe. All of those do help the channel. I hope to be bringing my own original what-ifs. I'll probably keep doing in this style. And AI read what-ifs. And I hope you have a good day. This will be Spellry, sign off.